After the success of the first Silent Hill, it was inevitable that a sequel would be on its way. Team Silent quickly got to work on the next game in the franchise, and this time, they decided to take the series in a more psychological direction, focusing on the inner workings of the mind of the protagonist. The game was developed on the then new PlayStation 2 and would utilize its stronger hardware to push the visuals beyond what had been seen previously. Silent Hill 2 was released in 2001 on the Sony PlayStation 2 and later ported onto Xbox and PC. It follows James Sunderland, who has come to the town of Silent Hill to find the whereabouts of his wife Mary, who had died 3 years prior. I'll say this up front: Silent Hill 2 is an improvement in nearly every aspect over the first game. The locations, the gameplay, the story, and characters, all of them have been completely overhauled, and I'll cover all of that later in the video. I can see why this is considered the best game in the series. It still holds up to this day, as I played it for the first time, and have thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. So, what does the town have in store for us this time? Silent Hill 2 starts with James Sunderland coming to the town of Silent Hill in search of his wife Mary, who
died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
The opening narration is the letter he received from Mary, where she says that she is waiting for him at their special place in the town, which James is unsure about, thinking that it could be the lake by the park where they spent an entire day when they visited. Beginning just outside the actual town of Silent Hill, he makes his way through the dirt path leading to it, passing a ranch and the cemetery. There, he meets a woman who seems skittish around him and warns him to stay away from the town as it is dangerous. James, however, is undeterred because he will stop at nothing to reunite with his wife. She reveals that, similar to James, she is in Silent Hill to look for her family, her mother, father, and brother. On the way to the town, James also picks up a radio and is attacked by the first of many, many monsters that he will encounter throughout this journey. He arms himself with a wooden plank and beats the creature to death. Reaching the actual town of Silent Hill, James discovers that the way to the park is blocked, so he has to find another way around to it. Exploring the town, he comes across a body holding the keys to an apartment in town, so we run over there, avoiding enemies, and we can begin exploring the first proper area of the game. Firstly, we have to find a source of light, as James did not bring any. Then, we continue exploring and we find a handgun. While trying to reach a key on the other side of some iron bars, a little kid comes in and kicks it away from us. If that was not enough, she then stomps on our hand and then runs away laughing. What a rude little child. Continuing to explore the apartments, we come across one of, if not the most iconic enemy in the Silent Hill franchise, Pyramid Head. He has quickly become a fan favorite, and I can see why. You can feel his presence from the very first moment he is on screen. James then manages to acquire a few more keys to unlock their way forward, where he chances upon a guy vomiting into a toilet bowl who introduces himself as Eddie. After a very pleasant conversation, James leaves him behind and heads over to the adjacent apartments through a broken window. There, we are reunited with the woman we met in the cemetery, who reveals her name to be Angela. She is seen holding a knife and, when she's talking to James, appears to be confused as to what she's in the town for exactly. I really like the way this conversation unfolds. Angela acts confused as to why she is in the town, but the tables are then turned on James when he has to explain that he's here to search for his late wife. The scene ends with Angela screaming and running away, dropping the knife she was holding, which James picks up. After solving more puzzles, James can make his way out of these apartments, but is then confronted once again by Pyramid Head and has to battle him in a small stairwell. Making it to the other side of town, James encounters the little girl again, who shockingly knows Mary, but runs off before James can question her further. James instead opts to make his way to the park, where he sees who he thinks is Mary, but turns out to be a different person entirely named Maria, who bears a striking resemblance to Mary. Dejected that Mary is not in the park, James then decides that she must be at the hotel where they stayed during the trip. Maria then decides to tag along with James. Maria and James both make their way along the long stretch of road, and once again, as has happened with every single time you try to go anywhere in these games, the road is blocked. Following clues on a body on the road, We make our way to a bowling alley where Maria refuses to go inside, saying,
I'll wait here. I hate bowling.
James walks in alone. Inside, we find a peculiar sight as Eddie and the little girl from earlier are both present here, and Eddie somehow managed to get his hands on a fresh pizza, which equally perplexes James as it does the player. We do find out that the little girl is named Laura, and she runs out on us again. Eddie seems unbothered that a child is running around in a place where a guy with a pyramid for a head is going around chopping people up, so it's up to James to go after her. Exiting the bowling alley, we find Maria, who's chasing after Laura, so both of them pursue her to where Maria saw Laura last. They spot her again, running into a nearby hospital. Following her there, James and Maria explore the hospital, but Maria feels tired and decides to rest instead, so we are left alone once again. On the roof, we meet our old friend Pyramid Head, who drops James back down to the first floor the hard way. We finally catch up to Laura, but she slips by us again by tricking James and locking him inside a room where we have to fight a boss. After this, we are transported into the otherworld version of the hospital, where we meet up with Maria again and have to solve more puzzle to unlock the door and leave the hospital. James is also pointed to the museum as his next destination. In the basement of the otherworld hospital, Pyramid Head attacks James and Maria, and they have to try to run away from him. While James makes it to the elevator, Maria is not so lucky and is stabbed in front of James, leaving him in utter despair, crying as the elevator ascends out of the basement. I was truly shocked when this scene played out for the first time, as I did not expect Maria to die. Although, with what is revealed later, it does make sense. James is devastated though, and it makes sense as it must feel like losing his wife all over again. Back on the first floor, James finds another clue telling him to go find a letter and a wrench out in the overworld. So we set out in the nightmare version of it. Running around, we finally find the letter and the wrench and use it to open a box buried beneath the ground in the park. Finally, we can now head into the museum, so we make our way there. Once inside, we do not stay in it for too long, as James finds a hole in the ground at the end of a long, long tunnel, which he then jumps into without a second thought. Somehow uninjured from the fall, he wakes up and breaks a section of the wall to reveal a door which leads to a different section of the museum's underground. There, he once again finds another hole which he jumps into. Yes, this is going to be a pattern now, so get used to it. We are transported to another area this time, with Eddie somehow being there as well. Although he seems to be losing some of his grasp on reality, talking about killing people and dogs. He then just gets up and leaves James in the middle of it. So that leaves us to explore and find our way around this new area, which we soon discover to be the prison. At the end of this section, we find, yep, you guessed it correctly, another hole in the ground. Jumping into it, we then take an elevator, descend down further, leading to a labyrinth of sorts deep underground. We then make our way through it, finding Maria, of all people, alive and perfectly fine. Physically, at least. He seems to be acting strangely, almost like Mary talking to James, and saying that he left a videotape of them back in the hotel. This scene feels so confusing on your first playthrough, and I love that it puts us in the same shoes as James, because even he cannot make sense of it, and Maria continues to be cryptic about it. We have to make our way to the other side of the bars to reunite with Maria though, so we go back out and find our way around the labyrinth. In the middle of it, we find Angela screaming at a monster. And now I must pause here to once again bring up a content warning, as this is very dark stuff I'm about to delve into. Angela screams in fear at the monster, calling him father, and after we defeat it, switches to screaming and kicking it in anger and drops a nearby TV onto it. In the outburst that follows, we learn that Angela's father used to abuse her, which has left her traumatized, and why she was calling the monster we just killed as her father. She leaves us again, and we have to make our way back to Maria, but find out that she somehow died in the time it took for us to get to the other side, sending James back into a fit of despair, leaving the body of Maria behind. We finally make our way out of the labyrinth into a cemetery and find an empty grave that James does not hesitate to jump into. We make our way down another corridor, at the end of which we find Eddie standing amongst a bunch of bodies. fully having lost his mind by now and gone on a killing spree against people who used to make fun of him all his life. He snaps at James when he tries to reason with him, forcing a fight, but unfortunately, he isn't the main character, so James is visibly shaken by the fact that he just took the life of another human being. So instead, he chooses to focus back on Mary and arrives at the dock where he rows over to the Lake View Hotel. Inside, we meet Laura again, and this time, James is finally able to talk to her, who says she's in Silent Hill for the same reasons as James is, to find Mary. They had gotten close during her stay at the hospital and had also received a letter from her. And now I'll have to put a spoiler warning on screen. If you somehow haven't played this game or do not know anything about the twist at the end, I would recommend stopping here, experiencing it yourself, and then coming back to the video. Alright? Now, for those of you who are still here, or those of you who are coming back, Laura hands the letter Mary wrote to her, telling her she will be in a peaceful place far, far away from the hospital, and, critically, at the very end, wishes her a happy 8th birthday, which James confirmed happened only last week, meaning Mary did not die 3 years ago. Laura then rushes off to find the other letter written by Mary that she dropped somewhere, while James continues going through the hotel, finding the videotape that Mary and he made all those years ago. Going back to the room that they stayed in, James rewatches the tape, which then shows Mary and his time at the hotel, but then suddenly switches to him at her bedside, where he lunges at her, covering her face with the pillow, and the video cuts out. Laura then enters the room, and James tells her the ugly truth that he has been trying to deny all this time. Mary is indeed dead, and has been the entire time we have been playing, because James killed her with his own 2 hands. I knew of the twist going into this game. It is common knowledge at this point, but even then, I had a hard time believing that the man we played as for the past 2 hours was even capable of such a thing. I wonder how it must have felt when the game released all those years back, and when players got to this part. It was even foreshadowed in the preceding Eddie boss fight, where, in one of his ramblings, Eddie tells James,
"Get all holy on me, James! This town called you too! You and me are the same! We're not like other people!"
This means that the entire journey that we played was just a thin veil of denial from a man trying to escape the truth of what he had done, and now in the end has to come to terms with it. The hotel also turns into the otherworld part, since the pristine condition it was in was just James's imagination of how it looked back then. He also meets Angela one final time, who mistakes him for her mother, but comes to her senses and then leaves him, walking into the flames. Leaving the burning corridor, we enter further into the hotel, finding Maria alive once again and strung up by 2 pyramid heads. They proceed to then stab Maria in front of James, killing her once again. James laments her loss, but realizes Pyramid Head represents his need for punishments for his sin, and after a fight with both of the Pyramid Heads, they stab themselves with their own spears, their purpose being fulfilled. The doors are then able to be unlocked, which lead to a long hallway where you can hear an exchange between James and Mary from the past. It opens into a stairway that leads to a platform. At the top, we see Mary once again, but it turns out to be only Maria, who has assumed the form of Mary, telling James she could take the place of his wife. He rebukes her, which in turn angers her, and she turns into a horrific monster that is suspended from the ceiling. Defeating her, James finally finishes her off, and in a beautiful cutscene, confronts his inner guilt of what he did to Mary while talking to her in a dreamlike sequence. Mary tells James to go on with his life, and he is able to finally get some closure and move on. Laura then hands him the real letter Mary wrote, as the one that he had at the start of the game was just a hallucination conjured up by the town's powers. The game ends with Laura and James leaving Silent Hill behind, and it is implied that James would adopt Laura as Mary had intended to do, as the letter said. Like the last game, Silent Hill 2 also has multiple endings, with the one I described once again being the ending that I got during my playthrough of the game. What I found interesting though is that unlike the last game, Silent Hill 2's endings are mostly dependent on the way you play the game, not on whether or not you collected a certain item or followed an entire convoluted quest line. The ending I have is called the Leave ending, but there are two more endings depending on things like interacting with characters or items a certain number of times, or if you choose to watch an optional cutscene or not. Even the exchange between Mary and James in the hallway matters to what ending you get. Instead of Leave, you can unlock the Maria ending by paying a lot of attention to her and ignoring the memories of Mary. In that case, you will fight Mary at the top of the platform instead of Maria. This is technically the bad ending of the game, as this means that James has learned nothing from his adventures through Silent Hill, and Maria coughing when they leave signals that the cycle is bound to start all over again.
You'd better do something about that cough.
The worst ending in the game is known as the in-water ending, where James cannot move on from the guilt of what he has done and has a different conversation with Mary in his dream. He then remembers the real reason he came to Silent Hill, which was to end his own life, and chooses to get into his car and drive into the lake.
Understand the real reason I came to this town. I wonder, what was I afraid of? Without you, Mary, I've got nothing. Now we can be together.
This is truly the most shocking ending, and finding out James's true intentions for coming to Silent Hill had an extra grim undertone to the opening cutscene, as that means that while he was in the bathroom, he was contemplating the act, but then the town got to him first. There is also a secret ending you can get on your second playthrough that does require you to collect 4 hidden items, called the Rebirth ending, which reveals that James has completely lost his mind and is seen rowing a boat in Toluca Lake saying,
The old gods haven't left this place, and they still grant power to those who venerate them. Power to defy even death.
In the same vein as Silent Hill's UFO ending, there is a joke ending called the Dog ending, where James discovers a dog who has been controlling the events in the game from a hidden room. It is absurd to the highest degree, and I love it for that. Later editions of the game would also add a new UFO ending into the game that is unlocked in the same convoluted way that you unlocked it in the first game. In it, PS1 Harry shows up with the aliens from the previous game and confronts James and then kidnaps him. It is another hilarious ending to the game that adds to the replayability of it. Once again, things like new weapons can also be found on a second playthrough, and you can always attempt all the endings of the game. The story of the game has aged fantastically nearly 25 years after its release. One could probably make an hours-long video just analyzing the characters in the game. I cannot do the amount of depth that all characters in Silent Hill 2 have the justice that they deserve. To keep it short, I will limit myself to just talking about 2 characters that really stood out to me throughout my playthrough, Angela and Maria. Angela fascinates me as a character for one simple reason. She is not a focal character, but has an equal impact on you as James does. And that is really saying a lot, as he is one of the most fleshed out and nuanced characters in the series. Firstly, Angela helps in the world building of Silent Hill. We do get a small peek into the way Silent Hill appears to her at the very end of the game, and that just goes to show how different the town appears to 2 different people at the same time. Not just the simple layout of the town, but its inhabitants as well. While we saw a grotesque monster that invoked the shape of a bed, Angela saw some kind of demonic twisted version of her father in the Abstract Daddy boss fight. These scenes help give us new perspective on how the town works, and I find that kind of world building interesting. Secondly, aside from just the world building, a story is genuinely tragic. With her father and brother abusing her constantly, Angela must have felt helpless and reached out to the one person who did not wrong her mother, only to have that shattered as her mother would verbally berate her and tell her the things happening to her were her own fault. He also knew of what her husband and son were doing to Angela, but never actually helped her, therefore making her complicit in it. Her mother would also abandon her at some point in life, leaving Angela with her father and brother who would continue assaulting her. She would snap one day and kill both her tormentors, but she was so broken by this point that it really did not help her situation in any way. In fact, it just sent her further in a downward spiral that allowed the town to call to her, where James would meet her. This entire story is only fully explained by gathering some optional memos, but it still hits as hard as James's story. This goes to show just how much thought and effort was put into fleshing out Angela's story, and that is really what elevates this game for me. Maria is a lot more involved in the main game's story, and one of the best ways to represent James' character as Silent Hill conjured up a whole new being whose entire purpose is to be the idealized version of Mary in James's head, but then it keeps taking her away from him again and again in increasingly violent ways. In that aspect, Maria is a poisoned treasure where the more James gets attached to her, the harder her deaths will hit. Maria can also be interpreted as a siren pulling James away from confronting the truth of his wife, instead delving further into his delusions. She's the sweet lie to contrast the bitter truth. I have only scratched the surface of these two characters, but hopefully it helped paint a better picture of just how much nuance and depth every character in Silent Hill 2 has. The director's cut of the game, aside from adding the UFO ending, would also include a short playable scenario known as Born from a Wish, where you get to play as Maria. This takes place shortly before James's arrival, and you get to see Maria slowly piece together her entire purpose of being. Most of the game takes place in a mansion, which is very Resident Evil, and she meets another character by the name of Ernest Baldwin, who does seem to know more than he's letting on. We never actually get to see who Ernest is, as he always speaks behind a closed door, and when Maria opens said door, there's no one in there. It is quite fun to play, and I highly recommend to get the director's cut version just to play the scenario. You get to see Maria and play as her, which is quite fun. The gameplay of Silent Hill 2 is a huge step up from the first game. I want to start by saying that the game has tank controls, but if you choose to, you can ditch them in favor of modern free movement controls from the very start of the game. In fact, that is what I did for my playthrough of the game, to get a feel of how it would play in a game like this, and it worked out quite nicely. Despite the game having fixed camera angles, the shift between them did not feel jarring most of the time, and I was able to control James quite smoothly throughout my entire run. The exploration in the game is similar to the first game, but I want to highlight a small change that really made it far less tedious. When you enter a room and there is an item, James will actually look at it. It really helps you avoiding having to run around pressing interact in hopes you find the item you are supposed to find to unlock a door, as if there is an item to be picked up, you already know upon entering. Something that I did forget to bring up in my Silent Hill 1 video is that you carry around a portable radio with you that helps you warn of enemies in the area or the room you are currently in. This is an incredibly handy tool, especially for confirming if you have eliminated all enemies in an area or not, and Silent Hill 2 also adds a simple quality of life feature by allowing you to adjust the volume of the radio independently, so it does not drown out every sound while playing. I really appreciated this change, as I prefer the radio a bit quieter than its normal volume, and being able to do so really helped my experience with the game vastly. All of these additions made the game feel smooth and fun to play. The puzzle difficulty of the game can actually be adjusted from when you start it. I played on normal difficulty for the puzzles for my first playthrough and had a nice challenging time with the puzzles. These puzzles require a bit more thought, and I enjoyed the puzzles where you have to combine 2 or more items to solve it. That being said, these puzzles were definitely a lot easier than the puzzles in Silent Hill 1. I'm looking at you, Zodiac Puzzle in Nowhere. but I want to bring up one puzzle that frustrated me incredibly during my playthrough. People who have played the game already know the one I'm talking about. It's the code written in blood in the hospital. I will start off by saying that it was quite a creative puzzle having to decode the numbers written by someone who's not winning any handwriting competitions any soon. My only issue is that the numbers are very, and I mean very difficult to read, and some numbers look so similar to each other. When I was trying the different combinations using the number 4, which is what it looks like, right? Wrong. It's the number 5. I had to go online and find a table of all the possible numbers because depending on the position of the numbers, they appear differently. And did I mention their random codes each time? That was a real pain to deal with, and I had to spend a lot of time trying to crack it. And I finally just had to look up what each number looks like online. Now, if it were a puzzle that required a lot of thinking, I would have been fine. But this was neither fun nor challenging, just frustrating. I'll say it again though, aside from that one puzzle, overall I still enjoyed all the rest of the puzzles in the game. In fact, I would say the Hanged Man puzzle is one of the best puzzles that I have solved in these games so far, due to the sheer amount of symbolism as James pulls the rope down while solving it. The game even features optional puzzles that reward you with more ammo and healing items. They are more straightforward puzzles though. The presentation of the game has been given a complete overhaul as well. The fog is much thicker in the game, and the otherworld's design has also been changed to reflect the change in protagonists. While in the first game, it had a more rusty metallic look to it, this game has more grimy, water damage environments for its otherworld. This can be seen very well in the hotel otherworld section. The siren that signaled the change to the otherworld is not as prevalent in this game as the last one, but it still does appear from time to time, like at the end of the first Pyramid Head boss fight or the Flesh Lips boss fight. The fixed camera angles also have some beautiful shots throughout the game. The lighting of the game has also improved considerably since Silent Hill 1, and as I stated in my last video, it was already really good looking to begin with. The entire game on your first playthrough has this pixelated filter on top, labeled as noise effect. It is reminiscent of old horror movies or analog media, but can be turned off in subsequent playthroughs, and I highly recommend doing that because the visuals of the game, including character models and environments, are top notch. Even the CGI cutscene from last game are given an overhaul with things like better facial animations and are now fully voice acted. There are also a lot more of them throughout the game, and you can tell that the team really used the new hardware to its fullest potential within the game. The voice acting, while nothing special in the last game, is actually done much better in the second game. James's voice actor did give the emotions his character was going through the game a lot of weight and played off a very calm, polite individual at the start, which really helps sell how shocking the twist ending is. I really like Maria's voice actress, Monica Taylor Hogan, the most in the game. The way she plays two different characters of Mary and Maria really helped sell the illusion that they were two completely different people before the plot twist was revealed. Of course, what carries the game's presentation is the soundtrack, and Akira Yamaoka truly must have pulled some magic from the town itself to create music this good. Each and every song in the playlist encompasses the wide range of emotions you will feel when playing the entire game. The soundtrack contains both quiet acoustic pieces as well as industrial grungy noises that are sometimes played right after one another when you turn from the normal to the other world. One might even get whiplash as you go from a soothing piece like Heaven's Night to Brookhaven's foreboding theme. Silent Hill fans can probably name their favorite song by heart because they stick with you. Almost all of them are atmospheric, blending perfectly with the exploration of the mysterious town. Promise is an emotional tearjerker. Laura Plays the Piano is a track you could have playing in the background while working. It has a soothing type of energy to it. Theme of Laura, especially the reprise version, is another such example. The Otherworld OST has a kind of industrial sounding grind to it that elevates the atmosphere when you are playing through those levels yourself, and they really sell the illusion of being trapped in hell made of dust and mold and water. Not just the other world, each and every area is given a new mood based on the song alone. Heaven's Night, both versions of Brookhaven, all of them have soundtracks that blend so perfectly with them that it is impossible not to think of these locations without the song associated with it. I highly recommend listening to some of these songs yourself. You will not be disappointed. The enemies in the game are the highlight of the playthrough. It goes deeper into the philosophy that the enemies that the town of Silent Hill conjures up are twisted versions of the psyche of the person it calls to. The enemies like the mannequins represent James's inner desires that were built up over the years of Mary's illness, and the same applies to the bubblehead nurses. But their twisted appearances can also be interpreted as his feelings of hate and anger towards the hospital staff for not being able to cure Mary. The acid-spitting lying figures personify his internal struggle with having to deal with Mary, their hunched appearances being a literal representation of the guilt he had carried the whole time she was sick. The bosses have the most significant meaning of them all, with Pyramid Head's purpose being explicitly stated in the game's dialogue as the manifestation of James's need to feel punished by someone for his sins, and Maria represents the perfect wife in James's imagination. She's outwardly flirtatious, dresses provocatively, but also serves as a way for Pyramid Head to punish James as he is forced to relive Mary's death over and over. Overall, the design of the monsters and their symbolism has been expanded on greatly from the simple fears of a child like Alessa had into the warped, almost punishing symbols of a man's greatest regret. Silent Hill 2, even after 25 years, feels fresh to play. I really enjoyed the entire playthrough and already want to dive right back in to unlock the other endings and new weapons on my second playthrough of the game. The sheer amount of love that this game holds for its fans cannot do it justice. The story, characters, enemy design, themes are all the highest highs of the series so far, surpassing Silent Hill 1 by a long shot in all of these categories. If you are planning to get into Silent Hill like me, or just horror games in general, this is a fantastic starting point. There is very little jank in the controls that a new player has to overcome. There is no prior knowledge of previous games needed to play, as the story is very self-contained. Even if you still cannot get into the game for whatever reason, there is a modern remake that adds all the extra bells and whistles that one expects from games these days. I will be covering that later as well, so stay tuned for that. Overall, for having the highest highs of the series so far, I will have to give the game a 9.6 out of 10. It deserves all the accolades and praise it has gotten over the years. Thank you guys, I hope you enjoyed. I had a really nice time playing Silent Hill 2. I am very much looking forward to how Silent Hill 3 turns out. So just make sure you're subscribed so you'll know when the video drops. As usual, you can also check out the entire playlist I've made for Silent Hill videos on the thing in the screen over there.